Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the Thursday episode of the 905er. It's going to be a good one today, for sure. Roland, why don't you start us off? What do you have to share?
Well, I thought we'd start off with just an update of what's been happening literally today at Hamilton City Hall. I was just thinking before we came on that, Hamilton City Hall almost deserves its own theme tune now. And it would be kind of like, that music you had at the circus when the clown car came on and there's kind of things popping and wheels falling.
the Benny Hill, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's a little bit like that, because that feels very much like the tone of the debate sometimes that was going on. And then, and not just with the debate. So the big debate at Hamilton today was LRT. The city was hearing from experts, from Metrolinx, from their own staff, asking questions about the costs and all the stuff that they should absolutely be doing. During the day, amazingly, this is probably the biggest subject, certainly the biggest single ticket kind of item when you're talking about like 3.1 billion, something like that they've been promised.
Yep.
Specifically for LRT. I can't think that Hamilton kind of ever discussed an item with such a big number attached to it ever before. Multiple occasions they either lost quorum because there weren't enough councillors there, or they were on the verge of losing quorum. Obviously, because this was a major debate, they got to 5:00, and as often happens at city halls across Ontario, they hadn't dealt with all the subject matter on the agenda. Now, they could have voted on LRT because they'd been through the various discussions there. Guess what? They decided not to, and they said, well, we don't want to rush it today. It's 5:00, and, it's been a long day. Now, I know, just to give an example that I'm happen to be familiar with, Burlington City Hall, in the last years or so that I've been following them in detail, they will have meetings that start at 9 a.m. that finish at 11 p.m. And I've sometimes said, this is crazy. If you guys cut down on your speeches a little bit, you could probably wrap up a bit earlier. However, knocking off at 5 p.m. when you're dealing with a $3.1 billion subject matter seems to me to be bonkers. And yeah, so this is the kind of thing that was going on while the discussion was going on, and then we can get into some of the arguments that were actually put forward.
Before we get into that detail, I want to back up and talk about the fact that quorum was not met at multiple times during this discussion. To put it politely, this is like you're basically being handed the entire project on a platter, like 3.1 billion. This is the magic bullet that this will pay for the construction of the LRT. The caveat is, once it's built, pretty much the cost of operating it falls on the city. So that's what they're voting on. So I'm just thinking, this is a major project. This is major, long-lasting legacy project for the city, and yet you have councillors who don't want to sit in here. If it's so important, we must hear all these points of view. We must have this debate. Then don't you want to sit and make sure that you listen to the debate?
Yeah, I don't know what it's like. What else are you going to be doing today, guys? Your councillors, if you're not at the full council meeting, what are you supposed to be doing? Hamilton has this weird. I don't know if they do this in other big cities. I haven't seen it anywhere that I'm aware of. And again, like a city like the next city around the corner, Burlington and Oakville, councillors typically, quorum is not an issue. All councillors are there. It's very rare for a councillor to be absent. Mm-hmm. If they are absent, they give their reasons. I actually looked at this a few months ago, or about a month ago probably, because Joey Coleman, who listeners will remember has been on here a few times, does a huge amount of coverage on Hamilton news, has been kind of making an issue of this repeated quorum issue in Hamilton. And they have this strange sort of setup where quorum comes and goes during the day. So it's almost like you start the meeting and there may be, I don't know how many councillors are there in Hamilton, sort of 10 or 12, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. And people will kind of come and go, so they won't be there all the time. They may leave the chamber. And there's no kind of mention of that made in proceedings unless someone says, oh, we've got to make a decision. Have we got enough people? Oh, no, we don't. We're a few short. This is sort of very strange. And you compare that with Oakville, where I noticed in their minutes, and this happens at every council meeting in Oakville, a councillor was 2 minutes late to the start of a meeting, and that was put in the minutes that Councillor X, I won't mention his name because I don't think he did anything particularly egregious, is 2 minutes late for the start of the meeting. And then we've got in Hamilton where people just sort of wander off and do something else for a while.
Well, what's striking though is that they're still doing Zoom meetings.
Yeah,
this isn't like old school where you'd have a council chamber, and if you're going on for a while, you might say, "I have to leave to use the restroom," or I need to stretch my legs because you're sitting there for hours on end. It can be a long day. I get that, but you're on a Zoom call in your home, like. I understand maybe you want to change of pace, but just take your laptop or whatever and take it to another room if you want to take it to the den or the kitchen or your office, whatever the case may be. You can do that. It's
I don't understand if councillors in other cities who have the same workload. I mean, sure, Hamilton is bigger than Burlington and Oakville. However, in terms of how often their council meets, the amount of things they're doing, it's not that different. They have full council meetings about as regularly as Burlington or Oakville does. The meetings, as I said, go on for at least the same amount of time in other cities. What is the problem here? It's
especially with something this important that needs they. It's not as if it's okay. It's another tedious line by line budget debate. Yeah. This is something that you can settle this debate once and for all. Vote yay or nay on it, shut it down, get it going, whatever it is you're going to do. But Lord knows the city of Hamilton does not need another political campaign for mayor and council fought on LRT. They put this thing to rest, people, and just move on. There are other things that you need to work on in the city of Hamilton.
Yeah. I'm just literally as we're talking here, I'm just going through. People who are interested in this can look up hashtag quorum watch on Twitter, and you'll get the breakdown of the various people who've been following this. So
that's always a bad sign, man. When your issue shows up as a Twitter hashtag,
and it's
bad.
It's not like there's only two people talking about it. But sure, Joey Coleman is maybe front and center, but there's a bunch of different people. And you can go through with the number of occasions on which 4 of the 16 councillors turn up late, and like you say, this is all being done online. One councillor is on leave at the moment anyway, and I'm not going to blame him for that. That's the health issues, and that's fine. But it's like $3 billion. Is that not enough to get you to turn up? I mean, what you look at your calendar as you kind of get ready in the morning. It's not like you have to leave the house and go, okay, what are we talking about today? Oh yeah, $3.1 billion for LRT. Nah, they don't need me for that one.
You know what? This is going to be fun to bring up with our guests next week. We're, as a bit of a teaser to our listeners, we're talking with one of the organizers of I Elect Hamilton next week, and it's going to be a fun discussion to bring up stuff like this that is not an uncommon occurrence in Hamilton City Council.
And I mean, just make sure I get my facts right today. And I'm reporting here what Joey Coleman reported, so I wasn't following the meeting. I have a day job, unfortunately. At 12:45, Hamilton City Council, after their lunch break, didn't have quorum to resume the meeting at 12:45. As at 5 o'clock, around 5 o'clock, when they were discussing whether to proceed to a vote or not, they were on the verge of losing quorum again. So presumably, whoever had come back into the room, so to speak, someone else must have left, or I mean, I don't see how. I don't know what the official quorum number is, whether it's 50%
Well, it
or
doesn't matter,
what.
but you think on it, quite honestly, part of that would be the job of mayor as chair of council to make sure, do we have enough people to keep this going? That is part of their criteria. Now, it shouldn't come up like it just be like, no, you sit down, you're an adult, you say, you do your job, you sit and you take part in the discussion. That part of that, it does, I think, fall on Mayor Eisenberger to step up and say, where are you going? What is so important? This is a huge, huge infrastructure project in our city. We need to deal with it.
Yeah, and I'm just since I was literally just looking up Twitter as we did this, I'll read out a tweet from February the 15th, 2019. Obviously, a very different meeting. I have no idea what they were talking about. So there are 16 council members in Hamilton. On that day in February 2019, 5 were present as the meeting began. The councillors for 3, 4, 9, 10, and 11. Not on time, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, and the mayor himself was not there. This doesn't happen in other cities, people. This is why we need the clown car. And then, to go to debate whether the LRT subject has been debated to death. The city has been offered a huge amount of money. The arguments that were being discussed at City Hall today were questions which generally have already been answered 100 times over, and you may take one side of that view or another. That's not what I'm disputing. But the questions were to such a large extent, kind of retreading old ground and taking a position and taking a point of view for a moment. To my point of view, very much about the councillors who just are opposed to LRT on a kind of religious level somehow. Looking for ways to say it was going to cost Hamilton money. So regardless of how often the province and the federal government says, "Oh, we're going to pay for pretty much everything. The only thing you've got to do is pay for the running costs, but you also get the ticket fees." So I mean that's how transit works in most places in the world. The person who runs it is on the hook for the costs of running it. But you're also on the hook for whatever profits you make. To say that's a good deal when not a single penny is going into actually paying for track and paying for infrastructure and all the rest of it is great. But this comes down to people moaning about the fact that it's going to inconvenience them when they drive from the suburbs of Hamilton down King Street or whatever, or trying to get into town.
No, it won't. Barton Street is not that great. Okay, so let's move on to the next our next topic, which is our favorite 4-letter acronym, our favorite 4-letter word on this podcast. No, not that one. It's LPAT.
Yes, LPAT. I think we used the phrase again to do with Hamilton a few weeks ago about this is why Hamilton can't have nice things. LPAT is the reason why the whole province of Ontario, certainly the whole GTA, can't have nice things. And in the case of Toronto, and we're the 905ers, so we don't really do Toronto news, but this is something that with wider implications. There was a very nice thing that was discussed by council in recent years, which is the idea of kind of putting a lid over the railway tracks in Toronto and turning it into a park. And boy, if there's one thing that Toronto lacks that would really make it a kind of a better city, it's like a really big Central Park. Central Park. Hey, that's a good name for a park. I don't know. I mean, can you think of another city that has a Central Park where people really like it and are kind of glad they didn't build on it?
No, can't think of any off the top of my head.
So LPAT, because everything gets appealed. Certainly, anything of any significance in any city gets appealed. So LPAT has managed now to take both sides and say that the city can build it, and now it's said no, you can't, in two separate decisions. Now, I mean, this is a legal system for you. LPAT is a quasi-judicial body, basically acts like a kind of court of appeal for anything to do with planning and development. And this all boils down to what's called air rights. So basically, someone years ago, where a consortium of developers purchased the air rights over the track. This is the kind of thing that boggles my mind sometimes. So they own the air rights, and the city would like to have them so that it can build. That's fine. The city could, no one's going to steal something from the developers. However, if the city has zoned it for parkland, the land is not worth very much to developers. If LPAT says that the same land can be zoned for high-rise, high-density buildings, then suddenly that land is worth a huge amount, far more than the city of Toronto could ever afford to buy. And that's basically what's happened here. And I'm repeating the story that was in, I want to mention Spacing Magazine and the Spacing podcast, which did a whole episode on this. We're just obviously going to cover it in a little bit of detail. So the idea about a city, the reason why a city exists to a significant degree is to say, we're the experts in this bit of Ontario. We know better. And we know better, particularly at a street level and on a corner-by-corner level, about what fits. So sure, you have your provincial policy documents. You have your growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, or whatever it's called now, which says, we want to have high-density downtowns, we want to have growth centers, want to have all these things which make us less reliant on cars. All great objectives. But the city takes that and translates that from provincial aspiration into street by street level reality. What LPAT does is it takes that kind of street level plan of the city, saying, hey, we'd like to have a park here in our downtown, like many cities in the world, and says, well, yeah, but the growth plan says we want high density downtown, right? So no, you can't do that. I mean, which is crazy, because it's like, yeah, Toronto's already extremely dense downtown, particularly near the lake. You can't take, and you're taking a very vaguely worded, and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe is very vaguely worded. Some of the key things that come up again and again and again at council meetings and at LPAT decisions are like single sentences that you kind of feel like a staffer wrote on a wet afternoon without really thinking what they were doing.
But honestly, that was kind of what, no doubt, that they did. It is because it's not. You and I were chatting about this before we came on. Like the point of things like this isn't. It's, in my mind, it's all political. It's never about getting the solution. It's the illusion of getting a solution, because this tribunal isn't about let's find the reality, because here's the reality. You can just stack it with people, whatever government of the day is there, you can stack it with people that are conducive to your political ideology. So you get a tribunal that you can stack because it's all political appointments, and you can put it into you can manipulate it so that, yeah, you want to give more freedom to your developer buddies, you can do that. If you want to run on a campaign of, we want to help municipalities and grassroots organizations build better communities, you can do that. It's entirely political. And the reason why it's the myth of it, because we all think, we go to our city council, our town councils, our city councils, and we make petitions. I don't want a building on this block or on this corner. I don't want a 20-story high rise. I want this to be green space. I want this to be, a parking garage, or whatever it is that you want to be. And you can organize all you want up to it. The problem is you're always you're always going to the wrong person. The problem is you shouldn't go to city council or town council. You should be going to your MPP.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Like you shouldn't be. You should, like, if you are in Burlington, Oakville, Milton, Hamilton, Peel, or wherever, you shouldn't be going to your city council and petitioning for these zoning changes. You should be going to your MPP, because 9 times out of 10, this stuff goes to LPAT, and it's designed to do that. It's not designed to be sorted out in the council chamber. I mean, the fact that you're going to have to go back into the catalog for this one, but when we had Shauna Stilte on to talk about what it's like as a councillor, like the fact that they can't talk about these issues outside of council, this is what happens. They can't have these conversations with other councillors to say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with a building going up in my ward, or people are really voicing their concerns to me. We need to stop it. This is all why. Because you get into council and people say, I'm not educated enough on this. I'm not going to vote on it. I'm putting it off. The developer sues because you're holding up my decision. I'm just going to go to LPAT.
And we use Burlington as the example here. So people who live in Burlington are very aware that after the current council was elected very much on an agenda of getting control of development. And the first thing that happened after that council came in was they passed a
moratorium.
Let's people. My memory is not good, so I've forgotten the official term, but the interim control bylaw. There it is. It comes eventually. Interim control bylaw, which on the surface appears to prevent development in the downtown area of Burlington, which means it's surprising to people when they see that there was an LPAT decision last week on a something like 17-story senior residence that's being built opposite Joe Brant Hospital. So it's like, well, if there's no development, why is LPAT saying there is? Well, because despite the moratorium, LPAT, the time limits that the province dictates and the LPAT's role still carries on just as normal. So the city saying we're not going to approve it means that the developer skips council entirely, goes straight to LPAT and says, hey, they didn't respond to me. Can I build this? And LPAT goes, yeah, sure. Now, I'm not particularly critical of that specific building. I'm not picking on that and saying that was a bad decision.
No,
That's neither here nor there.
But it's the process, right? It's the process. Just doesn't. It's not conducive to a democratic process, which is what everybody listening to this is thinking. That's how this has worked. I elect my city council. Therefore, when I want to talk about the buildings being built in my city or my town or wherever, my neighborhood, I go to my ward councillor and I petition my mayor and I write letters and I organize my grassroots, my friends and neighbors. They become my grassroots organization. We go and petition and we lobby, and everybody says, yeah, we don't want it either. We'd rather this be built there. And you think that's going to elicit change, and it doesn't, because the system is not set up for that. That's not what and this is kind of what, when you hear across the country, I'm going very macro on this analysis. You hear people like Mayor Nenshi out in Calgary saying we need urban areas need a constitutional mandate. They need to be written into the Constitution. This is why he's talking about it. Because the city of Burlington, the town of Oakville, the town of Milton, the city of Hamilton, the city of Mississauga and Brampton and Niagara and all the rest of us, they mean nothing. They are acts of the provincial legislature. They can change it if they wish to. They can change. They can decide, no, we take away your power to do X, Y, and Z. And there's no constitution. You can try and make the case to the Supreme Court, which is what some groups are doing right now with Mayor Ford and whatnot. But I mean, you're talking about conventions, and conventions can change. There's nothing explicitly saying cities and municipal government has these powers. It's a myth. They don't. They hope they do, but they don't.
And it's why people are starting to talk about Toronto maybe being a province in its own right. This all basically comes back to LPAT and the fact that the cities are not as strong as they should be. It's said, it's not actually accurate. It's been said by a number of people that Ontario is the only province that has this kind of setup. It's not accurate. If you go through every province, they all have their appeals procedures for development, and you can go around the world and other countries have their appeals procedures too. However, the strength of the LPAT, which comes from the old OMB and which has now been kind of put on steroids by the Ford government, is, I think, unique to Ontario. And it's completely out of whack. Now, you can make the case that, well, you've got to have something. I'm not entirely sure that that's the case. or you can make the case that the cities ultimately are the ones who've got the votes, and we should respect that. But this ain't right the way it is. I think we can agree.
You know what? Because I got the fundraising emails from the Liberal Party. They notified us that all that is 365 days until the next provincial election. I'm sure. I don't know if you got that as well. Well, Roland.
I've been cut off. I don't get anything.
Oh, they cut you off. I still haven't been deleted off the mailing list, so I keep getting everything. I'm hoping this doesn't mean that they're going to delete my name off the mailing list now. But I bring it up for a very good reason. Is that it's 1 year until the provincial election. There'll be a lot to talk about in that election, I'm sure of it. But I'd be more than welcome to extend an invitation to Premier Doug Ford, NDP leader Andrea Horwath, and Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca to come on to this podcast. Not all at the same time, God no, but just to have a chat about what their plans are for the 905 development. Obviously, among other things, won't just be about that. But I it's a year to go, and we need to start knowing. Like, this stuff is too complicated to wait for a 27-day writ. I think we need to start holding them to the fire now.
And you know what? We know this is a huge issue in every municipality in Ontario. If you look at Hamilton News, it's LPAT this, LPAT that. Burlington, my God, Burlington is a huge story. It's big in Oakville. It's big everywhere. And yet you will struggle to find any mention from any of those three leaders about there being a fundamental problem with the planning process. Now, the previous Liberal government, as one of their final acts, tried to reform the OMB. That's why it's called LPAT now. Unfortunately, it was one of their final acts, which was reversed almost within a matter of weeks on the new government coming in. And not only reversed, but worsened by taking the old rules and just making them worse. But yeah, we're doing the wrong thing, because we go to our councillors and we moan and bitch at our councillors. And seriously, it's one of the major reasons why I would not run again, because it's like, it's all responsibility with no power. People are going to blame you when they see a building they don't like. But really, yeah, I had a vote and I voted this way or that way or the other way. But honestly, it's nothing to do with me. It's to do with some guy whose name I don't even know who sits on LPAT. And that's just wrong,
Yes, it is.
Well, let's move on to item number 3. And guess what? It's the Hamilton Catholic District School Board.
Halton Catholic District School Board.
Oh, yeah, Halton. Yeah, sorry, God. My H's.
Yes, they are back in the news. Or at least they are. We're going to publish an article onto the 905 website detailing this. So if you want to read it more in detail, we'll have a link in the show notes for you to click on it. But pretty much the summary is this. In case people forgot, I hope they didn't, but the Halton Catholic District School Board back in April 26th, had a vote on whether or not to raise the pride flag at its schools. Long story short, they basically avoided it altogether by amending the motion to remove that part altogether, and they chickened out and didn't vote on it one way or the other. So the flag didn't fly. Well, apparently the Ontario Human Rights Commission noticed that. On June 1st, at the start of Pride Month, the Ontario Human Rights Commission sent a letter addressed to Chair Pat Murphy, as well as the Director of Education, Pat Daly, outlining some pretty serious concerns that they had. Long story short, their concerns are that by not flying the flag, the Halton Catholic School Board may be violating the human rights of the LGBTQ2S plus community. I'm just going to read the quote here, that the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario has recognized that an organization's failure to symbolically acknowledge pride events in some cases amount to a violation of the rights of the people who are LGBTQ2 plus to equal treatment and services under the code. And then they cite two legal cases to back up that assertion in the letter. This is pretty this is pretty serious stuff. I did. I sent a follow up to the Human Rights Commission. I basically said, what are you going to do if they decide not to fly the flag? And the spokesperson said they're waiting to see. they're not going to comment, but they're now in a waiting game. The board has to do something on this. Sadly, I did send out a request to Chair Pat Murphy and the Education Director Pat Daly to comment on this. I didn't hear anything back. I sent them questions. I didn't get a response to those questions. I'm still waiting.
Yeah, this is quite apart from the rights and wrongs of the situation. As a sort of student of how to do politics, this is a case where the trustees should know that the jig is up. You messed this up big style. At some point, whether today, tomorrow, someday, but soon, as Humphrey Bogart might have said, you're going to have to reverse. Well, you're going to have a real vote, and you're going to have to raise the flag. The cool thing to do, the thing that would get you maybe some credit, is to do that sooner and not later, and not just punt it down the road until another year, and not to risk letting this go to the next election and the Halton Catholic District School Board being remembered forever for this bad and mistaken decision.
There are a couple of things to unpack here. One, you mentioned in our last episode where we had Caitlin Grieve and Whitney Ross and Hannah Strom and Annie Wong on to talk about Pride Flag, Pride Sidewalk, all that. And you had mentioned how Halton Catholic trustee Vincent Ian Tomasi was saying there was too much human rights in legislation. It was about something differently, but that denominational rights had to trump human rights. Here's the thing: this letter is basically calling him out on that statement. Yeah. They're like this isn't a theoretical debate now. I mean, we're getting into an organization or a arm's length body that actually has some teeth to it. That is taking us a step into this fight and throwing down the gauntlet and saying enough's enough. So you can, to the Ian Tomasis and the O'Briens and the Carabellas on the Halton Catholic board that want to do this. Oh, we're Catholic and we have a special right and we have, there's special privileges. No, that's all bullshit. It's stuff that you've been fed by propaganda and whatnot. In this country, no religion has rights over another's belief or another's way of life. Section 1 of the charter explicitly says that every right in that charter has a limit, and there's a demonstrable limit to it. You can't go and say, oh, we don't want to raise the pride flag because we're Catholic. That's not enough. If you're a publicly funded what the letter is saying is if you're a publicly funded institution, you need to consider everyone in your publicly funded institution.
Yeah.
That's one point. The second point, I asked this of the human rights, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and they responded back. I want to know because, unfortunately, Halton Catholic is not unique in their ignorance to fly the pride flag. Hamilton Wentworth Catholic School Board also voted against flying the pride flag, pretty much saying verbatim the same criteria that the Canadian flag and the cross were universal enough. I'm not sure that argument holds muster this week for obvious reasons, but we're not going to discuss that this week, I'm afraid. But I do want to point out, I asked them I said, like, why are you singling out the Halton Catholic and not the Hamilton Wentworth Catholic Board? And the response was pretty much they hope all. Well, you know what? Hang on, I'm going to bring it up here because it's a. Yeah, I mean, the risk to my mind, they're throwing down the gauntlet on this stuff. Hang on, I got it here. Of course, it's taking forever. But basically, yeah, here it goes. So I asked them why did they single it? Said the OHRC encourages all school boards, including Catholic school boards, to join the school boards that have raised the pride flag to acknowledge and show support for their LGBTQ2+ students, staff, and community members. That's political we're going after you first, and we're going to make an example of you and give everyone a fair warning to get their house in order.
Yeah. I mean, and this ultimately comes down, again, I mean, it's that old phrase, you can't be a little bit pregnant. You can't be a publicly funded education system and an exclusive entity that only serves the beliefs and interests of a certain group of people. You can't have it both ways. The Catholic schools in Canada, or mainly in Ontario, are a weird function of our history that we're kind of left with. If the people who want to defend that school system want to defend it, then I think at the very least the province needs to grow the necessary entities to have the courage to take anything to do with religion, religious judgment, or morals, or any of that stuff out of the control of the trustees. The trustees vote on the budget. They can vote on, the hours that the school meets. They can vote on, I don't know, the other stuff that trustees do, right? There's plenty. The non-Catholic school boards seem to keep themselves busy. In this day and age, no elected representative at the level of a municipality has any business talking about gender, sexuality, or any of that stuff. They're not qualified to. They don't have and they don't have the democratic mandate to go near that stuff. So the province should be making decisions on that at a provincial level. If schools are to fly pride flags, then the province can decide that for everybody. And it would take these ridiculous things where we just have multiple municipalities either making fools of themselves or at least bringing some credit to themselves by voting one way or the other on this. And it's just not a discussion that these guys should even be having.
Well, I mean, the sad thing is, I don't think it was supposed to go down this road, honestly. I think the initial assumption was, because as the story goes, a student brought forward a request. Can you fly it? They said, well, no, this meeting isn't the time or place to have it, but we'll table it. And that's what they did. And a trustee, Brenda Agnew, brought it forward and said, we'll make this an actual motion, make this an actual policy. And from there, it just degenerated into homophobia and bigotry. And there's, I've really tried to parse my words. I don't want to inflame it, but there's just no way else I can categorize it, because the rhetoric, the both sidesism that you want to say, we want to have a debate on both sides, and we want to get to quote unquote the root cause of the issue, and we're can we have a different symbol? And I'm sorry, go ahead. What?
Breaking news, I believe. I believe that Burlington might have announced where its new flag crosswalk is going to go. And do you know what? It's pretty much right outside, or as close as they could get it, according to the votes of the Burlington public, to the front door of Halton Catholic District School Board. I think that's hilarious. Now, I know you mentioned that it may not be as close as one would like, but
it's pretty close. I mean, it's at the intersection. If those who are wondering, like to drive by and maybe honk and give a wave, is the corner of Fairview Street and Drury Lane in Burlington is the headquarters of the Halton Catholic District School Board. But yeah, I mean, this kind of parsing of both sides. What I'm amazed to see is that this letter is kind of calling it out. It's saying, no, you can't do this both sides. You don't get special rights. You don't get to use your religion to say, yeah, we welcome you, but just stand over there in the closet. Don't make it. And yes, I did use that word purposely. Don't make a scene of yourself. We don't want you're here. We can't legally kick you out, but we're not really comfortable with all the outwardly gay and lesbian stuff, which is basically what you're hearing from certain trustees on this. I find that I'm a little shocked that the trustees didn't have response to us. We did ask the Ontario Human Rights Commission to respond to us. They did. We also reached out to Halton Parent Allies, which is a grassroots organization. They responded back to us. As well, we reached out to Halton PFLAG, that Whitney Ross, who we had on previously. They responded back to us. All their statements are included in the article on the website.
And we've had trustees from the Catholic Sport Board on this podcast before on 2 occasions, and they generously responded to us very quickly on those occasions.
Absolutely. I find it's now, maybe they're talking to lawyers to try and figure a way out, because it's the Human Rights Commission. This isn't a grassroots letter writing campaign that you can just toss in a box and shove in a corner. You've got to deal with this. My bet is they might be talking with lawyers. They shouldn't. They should just say, "Fuck it, raise the flag." Like I at this point, that's how this is ultimately going to end up. Is that flag is going to be hung over the school probably before the end of the month, because they decided to do this. This isn't. They decided to have this debate. And they decided to go down this road, and they decided to try and outsmart the Canadian legal system. They were trying to outsmart human rights. They're trying to find a loophole around the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to promote their own bigotry. They got caught. That's it. They got caught with their pants down. The trustees that voted against raising the flag, they have egg on their face. They should be embarrassed. They should be shamed, because all their rhetoric and all their high and mighty, we're going to outsmart everyone, and we're going to stay one step ahead, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to solve this forever, and we're going to be unique and special. Turns out, no, you're not. You're dumb and idiotic, and you got caught, and now everyone knows it. So, you know what, guys? Fly the flag.
Yeah, I mean, when you're losing the battle, just give up. I mean, you've already lost. And every day that this continues, you make things worse for yourselves. We should probably leave it there. I mean, I think I hope that the student whose name I'm sorry I can't remember, who originally brought this to the trustees, and who Brent Dragnew also deserves some credit, probably a deal of credit, for being the one who actually brought this to the board and tried to get the right result. I hope, certainly as a student, to be involved in this kind of thing that becomes a national and even international story can be a little bit intense when you're still at school. So I hope that she is not dealing with any unpleasant outcomes from this story. But we should probably leave it there for today, after 3 good stories and 3/4 of an hour. And
it's Nicole Hotchkiss is who you're thinking of.
Yeah, I think she did Horton a great service by bringing this forward. And it's a shame that it was met with the response it was. But she, like the students we spoke to on our Tuesday episode this week, just amazing kids. I shouldn't call them kids. They're young adults, and they show a level of maturity and intelligence, and frankly, a level of articulacy and a ability to put really profound thoughts into words that puts me to shame, to be honest, but puts some of the trustees to shame even more so. So this will get there in the end. It's just sad you have to go through this first. Well, let's leave it there, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the 905er. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.